this meeting to order, and Jeff is going to do roll call. And if you can make sure that when you're talking, you turn your microphone on because we are recording.
Thank you for the reminder. If you've not been with us before, on the microphone, in order to speak, you would press the button on the right that looks like a person with sound waves coming out of their mouth. And that bar top of it will turn red, and that means that you are live. That does help us take our meeting minutes, so we greatly appreciate if you do use the microphone. For roll call, we're going to start with Joy Andrade.
Here.
Amy Beasley. Amanda Bryant is excused. Bruce Davis.
Present. Here.
Diane Fleet.
Present.
T.C. Johnson. Billy Love.
Here.
Chris Primo.
Here.
David Shad.
Here.
Liz Sheehan.
Here.
And Lella Still.
Here.
We're going to take a minute now. You all received, I believe, by email the minutes from last meeting. So I'll give you a few seconds, and then we will take a vote to approve those minutes.
And just going to reflect for the meeting minutes that Amy Beasley is present.
Have you all had enough time? Is there any comments or corrections for the minutes? All right, may I have a motion to approve?
I move approval of the May 14th meeting minutes.
Thank you. May I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. All those who approve say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I remember that word I practiced all day. Any opposed? All right, the minutes have passed. All right, so next I think we have public and partner comments for issues on the agenda. Anyone? There will be time for announcements at the end. All right, so I think we're moving on to committee meeting or committee reports. Okay, so we're going to go with Data and Systems Integration Committee report, and Marissa will be enlightening us. Thank you.
Thank you. On June 4th, 2025, we met at the Don Ball Campus Center for the Data and Systems Integration Committee. We approved our minutes from April 2nd, 2025. For new business, we discussed the 2025 Lex Count results. Jeff Heron reported on those results, and they are made available on our website for everybody, including the public, at lexandhomelessness.com. In 2025, our Lex count showed a 12.1% increase of 925 persons in 2025. That is a difference from the previous year of 825 persons in 2024. Some of the highlights from our Lex count is that more persons resided in emergency shelter than any other previous Lex count. Transitional housing beds showed the highest utilization from 2020. And we did see a decrease in unsheltered persons on the night of a Lex count, a decrease of 15 persons or 18.3% from 2024. And the largest increase that we saw was among households with children, and we saw a 40.2% of increase of persons. We also discussed our housing inventory count. All HMIS providers who conduct a quarterly HIC should be aware that OP has now created a revised quarterly HIC form that should be more clear for both providers as well as for us and OP. Yesterday, actually, we had an end-user work group where we discussed those revised documents, and our providers should expect those documents along with a recorded webinar later this month. A week before the quarterly HIC is conducted, OB did timely submit both our PIT and HIC data to HUD. We also discussed our system performance measures. myself, Marissa Webb, submitted those system performance measures to HUD timely. During this meeting, we discussed some of the highlights, including an increase of persons within our system, as well as an increase in the length of time that individuals experience homelessness. We saw a 2% increase of persons returning to homelessness, which primarily accounted for those returning within 1 to 2 years after exiting to permanent housing. We saw an increase for income within our system, and we saw a increase in those who are exiting from permanent housing to a permanent housing project to a permanent housing destination. We also discussed from our system performance measures developing a formal COC strategy. We had a data deep dive into our income measure, and we used that to frame a discussion for strategy building that we had in our advocacy issues and programs committee meeting that also occurred in June. For continuing business, we have begun rolling out our Lexington housing triage assessment. There are 3 trainings that are a part of that rollout, and we are currently providing our partners with that training material in several waves to ensure that we are incorporating more folks to be access points for our coordinated entry system and that they feel comfortable and confident in conducting our local assessment. Marissa Webb also provided the coordinated entry report for calendar year 2025 Q1. You can find that report within the DSI packet. Some upcoming trainings and announcements regarding HMIS new user training will occur in actually tomorrow, July 10th, from 9 to 2. And we will have another training that's happening in August. If you're interested in new user training, you will need to contact Adam Kuhn. In our end user work group, as I stated before, we had a recording and those materials will be distributed later this month. Our next meeting is going to be August 6th at 1:30 at the Don Ball Campus Center.
That was amazing. Thank you so much. Does anybody have any questions for Marissa? No? All right. So we're going to move on to our next committee, correct? So next is Program Performance and Evaluation Committee with Liz Sheehan.
Thank you. Our last meeting was June 18th at 1:30 also at the Don Ball Campus Center, 298 West Loudon Avenue. We started with our welcome and introductions, followed by our approval of the April 16th, 2025 meeting minutes. Those were approved unanimously. Our program reviews for that day, the first one was Bluegrass Care Navigators for their medical respite program. This is an extended social resources grant. We talked about some of their population and where their population gets discharged to. So one of the notes that I made there was that they have a 7% veteran population, 20% of their clients get discharged to temporary or permanent housing, with 33% of those going to emergency shelter. They are supported by Medicaid. Some of our discussion around their program was, some of their individual clients were served more than once. So there was some discussion about how people have pretty complex comorbidities and rehospitalizations. And that some of the folks that were in this group were chronically homeless population that were returning. We also talked about how they are very limited to short-term acute needs. So they stick to about a 2-week time frame, and they work on a case-by-case basis, case-by-case situation to try to formulate long-term plans for care. But part of our committee discussion then was about how we might be thinking about long-term medical care that is one of the needs that was identified by our shelter study that was recently published or reported out to us. Our second presentation was Independence Place for their intensive case management. This was an innovative and sustainable solutions grant. Some of the discussion for this particular program was around SOAR training for their staff. They're working on getting their staff trained. They currently have one staff member that has started training. We talked about use of the flex funds for help for folks that might need documentation acquisition as a part of that conversation. We also noted that New Vista will keep copies of documents on file for folks that can be scanned and uploaded into HMIS. So if you have in your service organizations folks that are having trouble, maintaining documentation, that might be an option. We also had some discussion about who they were serving and how they serve folks with disabilities. And so the question was, what is the breakdown of those classifications? Jeff ran a very quick HMIS report in the moment. 28% of the folks that they serve classify under a mental health disability versus other types. And then we had some conversation around how they take referrals. So particularly around the Empath Center, we talked about that particularly and what their intake process was to assess disability. And then Jeff mentioned that the advocacy committee is going to talk specifically about income support. Income support for clients comes up very regularly in our conversations with our service providers in our community and how we can assist folks within our community on that, helping them support themselves and having those ongoing sources of income. So our advocacy committee might be taking up that conversation. The next presentation we had was the Lexington Fayette Urban County Government, our COC planning grant through the Continuum of Care program, and Marissa presented on this. So some of the tasks that are covered by this funding are that they serve as Adam and Marissa serve as our HMIS lead. They organize the point in time count. They have continuous lived experience engagement opportunities. They have revised their coordinated entry process. They've added a 6-month review to grant awardees to help increase success of programs and increase system performance. Some of the improvement areas identified for the future are doing more deep dives into the data, training partners to look at their own data in a deeper way, formalizing strategy preparation to build consistency across the data platform, increasing confidence in HMIS use and data quality, and then increase in project applications. One of the questions that came up here was part of this funding has really increased their ability to provide technical assistance, and when that was mentioned, one of the committee members asked about how do we define technical assistance, and this was defined basically not as the overall trainings that are conducted for HMIS, but like the more individualized assistance on data quality. Our last presentation was the Lexington Fayette Urban County Housing Authority and the Landlord Partnership Program that was also funded through the Innovative and Sustainable Solutions grants. They had a little bit of trouble getting started due to some staffing, so they were able to hire a landlord liaison that has been working. They have 7 landlords in the program, and at that time, they had 27 units associated with this program. They offer landlord incentives for participating in the program, but then also offering new units within the program, and then offer some funding for damage claims. We talked a little bit about their targets because they had some staffing issues. They were under their targets, but they wanted to keep those at the same level for the future, but then be more aggressive about recruitment and marketing the program more. We talked a little bit more about the marketing, so what they're doing for outreach and what promotional materials they're using. Jeff suggested a 1-pager because some of those have been successful for the OB office. They're currently going around to complexes. They do booths at some of the different local conferences. They have a quarterly meeting with their landlords, and then they've attended some other local events out in the community. That ended all of our presentations for the day. Our next meeting is August 20th at 1:30 at the Don Ball Campus Center. And that is my report.
Thank you so much. Does anybody have any questions for Councilmember Sheehan? Thank you, Liz. So the next committee is Advocacy Issues and Programs Committee Report with David Shad.
All right, well, you've already heard a lot of my report. So we met on June 25th at the Don Ball Campus Center. We reviewed and approved the minutes from the April 23rd committee meeting. We had a discussion, as previously mentioned, on some of the COC system performance issues and primarily discussing the issue of how to improve earned income in our system, and discussion on obtaining employment, obtaining jobs. And so we had Dylan Shell with New Vista present on the Individual Placement and Support Services Program, the IPS program. He said that this is a job placement model that is focused on SMI population with their program, but he pointed out that it is a model that can be utilized with other special populations. And what is different with this model is they have a no discrimination policy, essentially meaning whatever issues the person has will not make it so that they can't participate. If they have a disabling condition that limits their, would typically reduce their ability to be part of a similar program, they will work around that and make sure to make the program easily accessible to everyone. So that is their goal, not to turn people away, to include the entire population. So this is a program in collaboration with Office of Voc Rehab. So the services are actually billed through Voc Rehab, and the organizations who wish to participate in a similar program would have to establish vendor agreements with OVR, which also includes some staff training that is done through University of Kentucky. Dylan discussed the billing structure for IPS. They have essentially a flat rate fee for a set number of hours, so $750 for 4 to 8 hours, and then additional incentives for maintaining stable employment over, I think, 30, 60, and 90 days. And, as part of this, the employment specialists meet with employers weekly to try to enhance job placements, to also network and do outreach, discuss the program, to, essentially build relationships with the employers. And so we discussed pretty in detail this program and the potential for applying it elsewhere in the continuum. We also discussed, we did the activity Marissa mentioned, where we discussed some of the strategies for increasing earned income. One of those issues we discussed was looking at some of the barriers, and the common barriers included transportation issues, mental health issues, and also just lack of motivation among the participants in our system. So some of the suggested solutions included expanding case management services, providing transportation assistance, including things like bus passes, and also job coaching that provided a more trauma-informed focus. So as next steps, the OHPI office will research and compile programming ideas ahead of the next meeting, which is August 27th. Anything else on that we want to mention? I think that pretty well covers it. There was a lot, so trying to condense it into. So in terms of the continuing business, we discussed the 1915 I Rise initiative. Jeff Heron mentioned that there will be a state webinar on this project scheduled for late August, and we'll schedule a subgroup after the upcoming meeting with the state, which I assume has already happened.
So we had a meeting with the state yesterday about COC system alignment. And then I believe they've now set the date for the statewide webinar. And I'm trying to look it up at Lola. I think it's July 22nd. Does that sound right? Okay, yeah, and that looks like it is potentially now available for registration online. Yes, it'll be July 22nd, 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. Registration is required, and that is free, and that is to help providers understand the process for certification. Technically, this initiative went live on July 1st. Behind the scenes, there's still some development of certain processes that are going on. But since the certification process can take some time, those that are interested in pursuing Medicaid billing for services like housing and tenancy supports are encouraged to go ahead and reach out to the state to initiate that process. So that they can be working on that alongside work that's being done to finalize process.
Right. Marissa presented on the lived experience engagement group. The July meeting was canceled due to the shelter study and the implementation of a task force by the mayor's office, which will not occur until the fall. So the next meeting will be scheduled to correspond to that task force meeting. And we have a couple of voting items here. Marissa again presented on the permanent supportive housing standards with revisions that included some personnel training requirements. So these updates were approved by the advocacy committee, so we need a second, yes. Would anybody like to second that? And those are included in your packet.
This will be a board vote item.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any discussion? Opposed? No opposition, so. And the next item was rapid rehousing standards. And do you want to?
I'm happy to speak to that. We did not actually bring this item through committee, so we would need both a motion and a second from the board. For our rapid rehousing standards, those help to govern our rapid rehousing services across different providers and funding sources. We had been in communication with the team in grants and special programs about one of their recipients who had a participant whose property that they were renting from required renter's insurance as a term of the lease. That was not defined as an allowable cost under the agency's policies and procedures or under our COC program standards. So we brought this quickly to the board directly so that we could try to get approval for the inclusion of renter's insurance as an allowable cost in that program type. That could potentially mean that if we were not to approve that, that if they have a unit that requires it, it would not be eligible under the assistance program. So to give context, under both ESG Emergency Solutions Grant and COC program regulations, renter's insurance can be an allowable cost so long as it is a requirement of the lease. And then it has to be something that is charged to all tenants at the property, not just those that are receiving assistance. And then further, it has to be factored into the calculation of fair market rent values. So it's really a pretty nominal change. We're really just making sure that if there is anybody who's receiving assistance and that is a requirement, that they have a pathway to still be able to access that unit. That's really all that the spirit of that is about. Again, they would be in compliance with regulation and have to meet those three criteria. But it was included in the packet for advanced review. We would be looking for a motion if there's no questions on that item. Yeah. So by regulation, it has to be factored in because it's part of the overall cost since it's required by the lease. So the tenant would have to maintain it in addition to any utilities. It could make it more challenging to make a particular unit fall within fair market rent value. But we were approaching it from the standpoint of that individual, if that did not fall within fair market rent value, could still look for an alternate unit. But essentially, if we don't allow the renter's insurance, then any property that has that requirement would automatically no longer be eligible for assistance. So the intent was to try to broaden the pool of available units for assistance, even if that particular unit may have a few extra dollars calculated into it. Typically, renter's insurance is going to be a pretty nominal cost, something probably around like $10, $12 a month. So that would be something that would also be paid by the organization as part of the rent or by the tenant.
Any other questions, discussion? Do we have a motion to approve?
I so move.
All right, second?
Second.
All right, all in favor? Any opposed? All right, that passes. And the last thing, we did have a discussion on some of the federal budget proposals that could potentially eliminate permanent supportive housing under the COC programming, condensing the COC, ESG, and HOPWA programs into one, and having a maximum of 2 years rental assistance, which is a huge deviation for all of our permanent supportive housing programs. So, and I think that's become reality. So I guess we will look forward to seeing how that develops in the future. But since that budget was approved, I'm guessing we will see more soon.
I'll speak more to that in a few minutes.
So are you good, David?
Yep.
Does anybody have any questions for David about his report?
Oh, one more thing. Next meeting is sometime. It is August 27th, right? Yeah. I know I said it somewhere, but all right.
August 27th or sometime. The next portion of our board meeting is the Jeff Herron Hour. So we'll turn this over to you.
All right, we're going to start with our encampment SOP and review report. Since our last meeting, we have worked 2 camps for removal. And this would represent the final 2 cleanups that will be included in fiscal year 25. So when we get to the summary, this will be the final summary for this fiscal year. Next meeting, we'll begin reporting on camps that were cleared under fiscal year 26. So the first location was on Southland Drive. OHPI received notification from code enforcement on May 27th. Street outreach attempted engagement on the same day. No contacts were made, but there was evidence of an active encampment. They returned on May 28th with no contacts made, and again on May 30th. On May 30th, no contact was made, but the camp also appeared to be potentially abandoned. Some of the items were left out in the rain, and the structure had been collapsed. They continued to make attempts, visiting again on June 3rd. At that time, there was no signs of additional activity. We moved forward with an initial notice posted on June 6th. Street outreach visited on the same date with no contacts made, no signs of active encampment. And then a final notice was posted on June 12th. Outreach made no contacts and saw no evidence of activity on that date. Due to a contractor already being scheduled in the area, that went ahead and was performed on June 13th. At a cost of $700. The other location that was worked in this period was on Wallace Court. That was notified to OHPI on May 30th via code enforcement. attempts at contact were made by street outreach on June 2nd, June 4th, June 6th, and June 9th. On all of those visits, no contacts were made. A tent was located. It had been collapsed on one of those early visits to assess for activity. When outreach returned to work with code enforcement on posting of an initial notice on the 12th, there was no contacts made, and the individuals appeared to have relocated, leaving only trash and debris behind. That was also removed on June 13th, and that was a cost of $580. So the summary for this period, with only these two encampments that were fairly low cost, was a total of $1,280, and that makes the average and median both $640 for this period. And of course, both of those again had no contacts made, so there was no individuals that we were able to make service engagement with. Summary for the fiscal year 25 period, we performed cleanup of 19 unique locations, representing 22 individual cleanups. The total cost for fiscal year 25 is approximately $65,502. That makes the average cost per cleanup approximately $2,977. Since we know that we have a couple of camps on either the high or low extreme end that might skew this, we also calculated a median. And the median cost per cleanup was much more modest at $1,094. So one thing that we would note is that this is an increase over the previous fiscal year, which I think was just above the year before that. So we are continuing to see higher cost associated with encampment removals, which is one of the points that we emphasized in terms of the shelter study, that we would be much better served to invest in interim housing options for persons and have a permanent investment made there rather than simply move people from place to place and incur significant costs in the process. Out of the 22 removals, we had 12 camps where no contact was made or there were no signs of active encampment. Emphasis areas, we had 8 cleanups performed on emphasis areas at 5 unique locations. Only 10 locations had contact made with residents. A total of 22 persons were contacted. 3 of them engaged in services and 19 declined or relocated voluntarily. So 2 things here. One would be that we would like to see a much higher rate of service engagement and more positive outcomes for individuals. That would be, again, a reason why we're recommending additional shelter beds within our system. We have populations right now that are unable to access shelter and have barriers. So we need to introduce additional low barrier beds to meet their need, to give an alternative. Much more stable environment leads to better service outcomes. The other thing that I would mention is that we requested and were approved for a new position in the Office of Homelessness for fiscal year 26. We are going to be hiring an encampment coordinator. That job posting should go up any time now, just waiting on a final approval. And that will be published on jobs.lexingtonky.gov. That encampment coordinator is intended to take some of the administrative work associated with encampments off of my plate and have a dedicated staff member who's going to spend the majority of their time out in the field. They will receive reports of encampments. They will work to assess the level of activity and risk that's associated with those. They would oversee connection to services with parties like our street outreach teams, follow up on those plans to understand how to set timelines for removal in a way that leads to more permanent solutions. And then they will eventually take over reporting to you all on this subject. So we're very excited about the new addition and having a team member who is going to be directly in the field, who will have the ability to work with our team and identify service options and help facilitate them. And then when the time comes, work with the internal and external partners on removals. One final note that I'll give regarding the fiscal year 25 report is that there were a couple of costs that may not be reflected here. We began last report including the cost of dump tickets, and that was basically special disposal costs associated with things like tires. Typically, those are fairly nominal cost, but they were not available for this report on the timeline that I needed to send the packet out due to fiscal year closeout processes. So when I report final costs to the council later this year, there may be a slight variation on these totals. Any questions regarding the encampment report? We had no updates at this time to the standard operating procedures, although we will be updating those likely for the next committee meeting, just to shift some of those responsibilities to the new position.
I don't have a question, but I appreciate you including the average and the median in the statistics to show kind of both sides of that, because we know some of these are much higher costs than the average.
Yeah.
Or much higher cost than like what we see here with the 640. Like two of them were in the $19,000 and $21,000 range, and that pulls our average. So I like seeing the median too. So thanks for putting that in.
Yeah. To that point, like literally one of those previous camps would be multiple times the entire total for this month's report. Other questions regarding the report?
Do you think the lower amount this month was because of the heat? It just seems like since I've been here, there's been like way more.
So we typically try to avoid a lot of cleanups or removals during extreme weather, recognizing that that puts a hardship on individuals that might be trying to relocate in conditions like extreme heat, a snowstorm, excessive rainfall. It may be difficult for them to gather their belongings, find somewhere else to relocate. Part of this is going to be just kind of ebbs and flows throughout the year. So these would have been prior to the heat really getting extreme, because we started working these camps in May. I think that probably a lot of it is just that we probably haven't discovered some of the camps over the winter that may not even be active anymore, but tend to become more visible once people are outdoors more frequently, walking around the neighborhoods, reporting things to us. I believe that we're going to have probably several more than this in the next report. We've found several abandoned camps in a couple different areas. Right now, we're working on addressing a few over in the Hamburg area, as well as a couple on the north side of town. So I'm aware of several abandoned camps and one or two that we're actively working with individuals at those locations. So it's really just going to be a reflection of kind of seasonal shifts. All right, if there's no other questions, I'll just go down into the director's report next. First would be a budget update. This one also comes with a disclaimer regarding our fiscal year closeout process. I did my very best to give you accurate totals with limited access to our financials. Would have definitely worked on this a lot sooner in June if I had thought about it. But right now we're going to have 3 different years worth of funding that is included. We have already expended all of our fiscal year 22 and 23 funds, which were funded via ARPA. I did include the fiscal year 24 budget because we do have a small amount of money that is still being operated off of by a few of our programs right now. Independence Place just closed out the first year of their intensive case management grant. Landlord partnership program with Lexington Housing Authority still has a significant balance. We had funded that program for up to 3 years. At present, we are working with the LHA team. They've hired a new landlord liaison who's very enthusiastic and has some great ideas. We're working with them on a revised budget, and then we're going to go ahead and extend the period of performance on this initial term and let the Program Performance and Evaluation Committee make a determination about pursuing additional funding for additional annual terms. We also have the shelter feasibility study, which just completed and came in just about $5,000 under budget. So you'll see balances that are going to be unexpended highlighted in yellow. So we have about $744,000 still remaining from fiscal year 24. As a reminder, at the beginning of that fiscal year, we received our typical annual set aside of $750,000. And towards the end of that fiscal year, when the ordinance was modified for fiscal year 25 to shift us from a flat amount to a percentage of previous fiscal year revenues, essentially doubling our allocation, we also at that time received an additional $750,000 for fiscal year 24. So we are still in the process of trying to get all of that out the door. With a caveat being that we're also being mindful that we need to keep a little bit of reserves in case there are things like programs at a federal level that are defunded, where we may need to step in and try to put some of our funds behind stopgap measures and interim solutions. Next, you will find fiscal year 25 budget update. For fiscal year 25, we have numerous programs that went under contract towards the end of the fiscal year, leaving us with only $147,526 unallocated out of our $1.4 million for the fiscal year. Many of these programs have just started to expend on this term, so you're going to see a lot of higher balances. Right now, the unallocated amount would assume that all of these programs are going to come to completion, and programs like LHA's landlord partnership would continue for an additional term. If that does not come to fruition, then we would reallocate those monies towards another project. In addition to our Innovative and Sustainable Solutions funding for fiscal year 25, I've also included our winter response funding. This is not board-controlled funds. This comes from the general fund, but just wanted you guys to have this information and understand what the financials were. So we did have a few different areas where we had some balances at closeout. Just a couple $100 remained for security cost, lower than anticipated. And we have probably around $115,000 in hotel funds that were not used. We did have a significant amount of damages that were paid out, but overall between the two properties, we came in a little bit lower than what we estimated to cover those damages. And then additionally, the Bluegrass Care Navigators program was just under $19,000 that was left at the end of the term. And then we had about $3,000 in financial assistance for winter shelter residents that ended up coming back to us for two households that ultimately did not move into the housing that we had issued assistance for. So that means that the actual spent for this previous winter was about $2.178 million. Finally, for fiscal year 26, this would have just began on July 1, so very few of these items are going to show expenditures. Right now, we have paid out our HMIS subsidy for the year. This office does subsidize end user licenses for our homeless management information system to incentivize participation. And then we are anticipating renewals of street outreach, intensive case management, landlord partnership program, and the housing flex fund. With that in mind, assuming that all of those programs do get renewals, we have $384,564 unallocated. So across the multiple years, we are going to have probably, I'm trying to do math quickly in my head, it's going to look like probably about 1.4 million or so that's available. So essentially 1 year of our new annual allocation. Also went ahead and included information from general fund. We did have some commitments that were made in this budget that would include a $2 million allocation for this year's winter weather solution, as well as $200,000 to update our 5-year strategic plan, which will be coming to an end in about 6 months. Any questions regarding the budget report? All right. Well, we will definitely have further discussion around our funds and funding strategies that we want to pursue. That would include some of the discussion that we had in advocacy around employment and earned income solutions. But we're going to continue to work through other areas related to performance and system needs. Usually we would develop those priorities within our advocacy committee, and then program performance and evaluation committee would work with us on allocating out those dollars. So the next item in the director's report is going to be a request to provide funding to Greenhouse 17 to address emergency repairs. This information was included as well as an estimate of the repair cost in the meeting packet, but I'll go ahead and give a little bit of information now. So Greenhouse 17 has been working to replace their fire sprinkler system since approximately December of last year. They were able to do some temporary repairs at that time, but were advised that those repairs were going to be temporary, and definitely that overall the system was at the end of its life and would need replacement. As such, Greenhouse submitted an application for federal funding, specifically for CDBG or Community Development Block Grant funding via LFUCG to fund this project. They were awarded money. However, we have not yet received funds from HUD, and as such, they've not gone under contract with us. Due to federal regulation, they cannot use any funds from that award towards this repair prior to the execution of an agreement. And if they were to start it, they would not be eligible to use any of those funds to reimburse for the repair. The overall amount estimated for this repair is about $201,000. Unfortunately, in June, there was an additional issue with the sprinkler system that caused a leak that caused some significant damage to the property. So they had to turn off the water at the shelter in order to prevent additional damage. They were able to go ahead and get water restored with another temporary fix. However, they've been advised this is the absolute last temporary or emergency fix that can be made to the system, and it's going to require them to start the project as soon as possible. So that left a little bit of a conundrum. We know they will not be able to use the CDBG funds that were originally intended to go to this, and they have 200,000 or just a little over that need to be identified. Thankfully, they've been assertive in trying to explore other options. They've worked with their statewide network, Zero V, and identified some funds that can cover a significant portion of the repairs. Essentially, they'd be able to cover about 155,000, leaving a gap of around 151,000. With this in mind, we have brought this request to the board for consideration for funding with the Innovative and Sustainable Solutions Fund. Essentially, we are in a position that we cannot lose additional shelter beds. Our shelter study has revealed that we need approximately 500 additional year-round beds to meet needs now and over the next couple of years. And unfortunately, since the time that that study was released, we've had a couple of further reductions in shelter beds. Catholic Action Center is no longer operating contracted residential services for veterans, a loss of approximately 14 beds. And Arbor Youth Services has recently reduced the number of beds in their 18 to 24-year-old shelter from 24 to 11. This would be a situation where if they were not able to operate with working water, we would have to find some kind of an alternate solution for their 42-bed facility, primarily women and families, which are unfortunately some of the beds that are the most scarce within our system at present. As such, we are bringing a request to the board for consideration. We would propose that we would consider funding approximately $60,000, which would be enough to cover the gap with a small contingency. Definitely glad, however, to take any questions that you might have or talk through any concerns.
Just real quick, it seems weird to sit here as Jeff is talking about this, but I also feel kind of strange asking and kind of going over that myself. So I'm happy to step out if you need me to step out, if you all need to talk, but I'm also happy to answer any questions. And he's much more eloquent than I am too. So actually it was a really great proposal. Thank you.
And we have already discussed that Diane would be recusing herself from a vote. Any additional questions for either of us? All right. So if there is a board member that would support this, we would welcome a motion.
Move to approve.
Who was the second? Thank you. All right. Any additional questions or discussion? All right. So this would be a board vote item. All of those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, that motion passes. We will work with Greenhouse then. My office will work with Law to draft an agreement. We will get that to council once they come back from recess, and we will go ahead and include a date for the period of performance that would reflect today's approval so that they can go ahead and get started on that project as soon as possible. All right, you're gonna listen to me some more. So next, I wanted to give you an update on our shelter feasibility study. We did present that to the council at the June 3rd council work session. We, of course, fielded several questions. We had an amazing turnout from our providers and those from the population that we serve. We were really grateful for everybody who showed up, whether you made public comment or not. There was over an hour of public comment that was made, and only 2 of those public comments were against the establishment of additional shelter beds. Overwhelmingly, the voice that the council was able to hear was the need that we have for additional beds, for beds that would meet the needs of certain populations like couples, those that might have pets, and additional beds for certain populations like women and families. But also shelter beds that better serve our community, those that would operate lower barrier, have higher levels of support for things like mental health and substance use that are going to be better equipped to meet individuals' needs and keep them in shelter. And we definitely believe in what the data tells us about our need. No action was taken by the council at that time. However, the mayor did announce that she's going to convene a task force on homelessness. That task force is expected to begin work late summer, early fall. Right now, I'm not able to share the membership of that committee as the mayor is still working through appointments. What we are doing right now in our department is making some plans for how that process will work. How frequently the committee will meet, where they will meet. We're trying to work on plans to make sure that that information is accessible, trying to see if there's opportunities for us to do things like potentially broadcast those meetings. We definitely plan on having some opportunities for input from the public. That could include things like us having separate meetings with folks with lived experience and including a summary of those meetings to the task force, but also having some town hall type meetings that would give people direct opportunities to speak with the task force, as well as doing things like bringing in some subject matter experts that can help inform the task force and their work. So again, that is expected to begin late summer, early fall. We hope that that's going to be a process that will move quickly. We want to make sure that it's intentional and that it builds solutions that work. But we also know that we need to be working on those beds now, given our current inventory and gap, but also potential federal cuts that are coming down the road. The shelter study itself is available both on LFUCG's website in the Office of Homelessness Prevention and Intervention section, as well as on the Lexington Homelessness Continuum of Care website. Should be a link to that shelter study right on the landing page of the LEH website. So if you want to do a little light reading and take in 70 so pages of data and analysis, dive right in. We definitely would welcome any questions that you all have about that. Anytime, we'd be glad to talk through that with you. And we definitely plan on bringing updates to this board and membership so that we can get additional support throughout the process. Like I said, we were really, really pleased with how many people turned out for the presentation, but we know that there's going to be additional stages that we are going to need that level of support. For example, we really strongly believe that we're going to face intense opposition once a location is identified. So we really need continued support in this effort. Any questions that I can potentially speak to regarding the shelter study?
Jeff, I did not attend the public hearing. You mentioned there were a couple presentations, I guess, in opposition. Are there any lucid comments in opposition?
The two that I recall, one was we did include some locations in the study that would be example locations. They are locations that, for example, would be the approximate size parcel that we would need, have features that we would need, like accessibility to public transportation and other services nearby. And in areas, for example, that would be more conducive to things like services and not necessarily situated within highly residential areas where we would expect higher levels of opposition. We are not moving forward with any of the 4 locations that were included in the study. The task force is going to help us to some extent with identification of additional locations that we can pursue. Of the 2 comments, one was specifically about one of the proposed locations in the study, just stating that they were from the Eastland neighborhood where the Catholic Action Center is located and that they feel they're already oversaturated. That's kind of the argument that we get from any district or neighborhood that has a service located within it. For example, we get that argument about the downtown core a lot. And, from our perspective, we're trying to build services that are accessible where people are, where the highest need is. It's not with any intent to oversaturate any particular neighborhood. We also strongly believe that building the right supports ultimately mitigates neighborhood impact and better serves everyone. The other comment that was made was just in opposition of shelter and wanting to support development of affordable housing instead, which we also support, but we recognize there's also a need for interim solutions. The affordable housing properties that we're building are great, but they don't always meet the needs of this population, which typically, when they present within our system, have a lower AMI or area median income. They're typically going to be 30% or below AMI, where most of the properties that we would be building are intended for folks that are closer to about 60% of area median income. The intent of us trying to pursue shelter isn't shelter alone, but it's shelter that would bring together resources more in a centralized location, improve system navigation and connection, essentially more of a campus style kind of approach. So those were the two comments that I remembered offhand. And ironically, the comment that was in favor of affordable housing over shelter is from an individual who has spoken in opposition of several affordable housing projects.
I don't have a question, but I do also want to extend my gratitude to all of the people who showed up to speak with council. From a council member perspective, like that is one of the most powerful ways to advocate to us is directly at those council meetings when we are discussing a topic. So I appreciate all of the time and energy that went into getting everyone there at a particular time. But I am going to agree with Jeff as well that like that level of support is going to be very important moving forward when there are opportunities to give feedback, whether it's to the task force or back to council, again, as these discussions continue, because that's what it's going to take to get this done ultimately.
Thank you. And we would like to extend not only to our partners that were there, but also to our two board members serving on the council, Councilmember Sheehan and Councilmember Beasley. You guys have been tremendously supportive of this effort, and we really appreciate it. All right. Hopefully the last thing you have to hear from me will be a Continuum of Care program update. David touched on some of this when recapping the last advocacy committee meeting. There are federal budget changes that are being proposed right now that would have a significant impact on the work that we do. Fortunately, the big beautiful bill, as some call it, not what I call it, it did not directly impact funding for things like CDBG, home, Continuum of Care program, ESG, housing choice vouchers. However, there are recommended cuts that would have a significant impact. I believe July 14th, there will be some decisions made about that, so there's still time to contact your representatives. Some context. There is approximately 43% reduction in funding for things like housing choice vouchers or Section 8 vouchers. That would mean that individuals who are in housing now would be at jeopardy of having their assistance terminated, and that we would also lose sources of rental assistance that are available to folks outside of those experiencing literal homelessness. The impact of that is that we anticipate that we would see significant inflow into our system. When people lose those vouchers, they're likely to get evicted from housing and not being able to establish subsequent housing. Additional things would be essentially the elimination of the Community Development Block Grant or CDBG program. That typically funds a variety of neighborhood projects with about a 15% allocation towards services. So an example would be Arbor Youth Services has typically received CDBG funds for their outreach center for youth. New Beginnings has typically received that for a housing navigation program that they use to help participants move on from permanent supportive housing or to transition out of institutions like Eastern State Hospital and Central Kentucky Recovery Center. And then home would also be eliminated under this proposal. Home dollars fund things like rehab and development of affordable housing properties. It's often paired with LFUCG's affordable housing dollars to make projects viable. And then the biggest change for this group specifically would be proposed changes to the Continuum of Care program. It's being proposed that the Emergency Solutions Grant Program, HOPWA, Housing Opportunities for Persons with AIDS, and Continuum of Care program would all three be consolidated into one program and funded at lower levels. So right off the top, we would automatically lose money as a community. Additionally, there would be a limit placed on all assistance to be capped at 2 years maximum rental assistance. Within the Continuum of Care program, we presently have several programs that operate as permanent supportive housing. They are intended to serve those that are most chronically homeless, those that have the highest level of need. Presently, permanent supportive housing programs do not carry a specified limit on assistance length. So it gives us the flexibility to work with somebody as long as they might need that level of support. While we do make efforts to try to transition people off of that resource when they become more self-sufficient to free up the resource for new individuals, it's very, very unlikely that the majority of persons that utilize that type of resource can sustain self-sufficiency with a 2-year limit on assistance. We're talking with individuals that have disabilities, individuals that have experienced homelessness for a year or longer, typically multiple episodes of homelessness. So we're very concerned about what this would mean. So definitely please consider reaching out to your representatives and advocating that they do not reduce funding for HUD programs and specifically for the changes around things like the Continuum of Care program. There are a variety of really helpful tools that we're glad to send you links to if you reach out to us that help you identify who your elected officials are, so you can easily reach out to them by email or by phone. I know sometimes we get disillusioned and think that those are steps that we don't need to take. But the more that you let your officials hear from you, the more that they can go into those votes knowing what the impact means to their constituents. The other update that I have regarding the Continuum of Care program, we had last year applied under a 2-year NOFO, expecting that we would not have a competition this year, that we would just be doing a flat renewal. About a week ago, we received notice that there will indeed be a fiscal year 25 COC competition. At this stage, we have no details. We do not know a timeline. We do not know if any additional funds will be made available. The notice did specify some areas of priority, like working to increase self-sufficiency of participants, working to address unsheltered homelessness, working to address family homelessness, and then some encouragement of things like engagement of faith organizations. But there's no information as to what the actual process will look like. Typically, we would begin this process around July when the NOFO would usually be released. And then we would have our local competition open and end around September. And then late September, as late October, we would be turning in the overall community application. Where we're at right now, we have just received information within the past several weeks about our grant inventory worksheet, which is our ability to confirm with HUD that all of our projects are listed and listed at the correct amounts. And so we are going to be submitting that to HUD this week. The due date for it is actually going to be late in July, I want to say the 28th. And then the field office has till late August to go ahead and confirm all of that information on their end. Translating that into last year's timeline, last year we would have submitted our GIW around July 10th or so, and about another week later, the field office turned that information into HUD. So already we are going to be behind that timeline. And last year we saw our collaborative application due on October 30th. So we're anticipating it is probably going to go late into the fall. My hope is that we're not doing this as we go into winter when this office is going to be very busy. But we will share information with you all as we receive that. Definitely be looking out for email communications. Once the NOFO drops, we will work to quickly review it and issue a notice regarding any funding that's available. My hope is that we will have additional funds made available. It looks like there's going to be some new flexibilities under this year. They are going to allow transitional housing as well as street outreach. Street outreach has never been an allowable activity under the COC program. So we would really love to see that as a way to get some sustainable funding for our street outreach teams. But without additional funds, it means that we would have to reallocate funding away from one of our existing housing programs in order to be able to fund any new projects. So we'll definitely be keeping you advised, and we are cautiously hopeful that maybe this will be an opportunity to add some resources that are sorely needed. Any questions that I can attempt to answer regarding the Continuum of Care program update? All right, now that I've uplifted you with all of that positive news, I finally get to stop talking. Next regular meeting will be September 10th here in this room at 1:30. And now we are at other issues and public sharing. This is for issues not on the agenda. So you can announce events, you can speak about issues, raise questions. It doesn't have to be items on the agenda.
I'm so sorry. I just hearing everything that you all have been discussing. I have been homeless for 17 years here in this city, and that's a problem. I have went and voiced my opinions to the city, and that's a problem. One of the issues that I have witnessed for myself being a major problem is the drug use in this city. And nobody is willing to stand up and voice out what to do with the problem. People like myself and Rodney and Marcus, these three right here, okay? No drug use, no drug problem, nothing. But when the wintertime comes, we six right here are the last ones to get housed, and we're having to sleep it out here and tough it out here in the wintertime. But then the minute that our bodies end up dead, who's going to go and talk to our families and tell our children, tell whoever that we're so sorry that we had to bury a loved one because of the extensive drug use here in this city, and nobody wants to address it. I do not want to be the first one to try to judge somebody. However, sometimes in life, you have to judge something because right is right and wrong is wrong. And the only thing that I keep on hearing everybody overlooking is the screening process when you are helping the homeless community. And I do feel that there needs to, in fact, be a screening process because that does not help the homeless community, like people like us six who have no history of chronic drug use, who have no history of drug use at all. And I'm 17 years homeless. And I cannot seem to get stable for nothing. I have endured 2025 winter homeless. I have endured 2024 winter homeless. But then every time whenever the city comes out with funds to put people in hotel rooms and things of that nature, the first ones to go and get assistance is the ones that's on drugs. So I feel like that someone needs to take it to the mayor. because a citizen like myself trying to get in an appointment time with the mayor is out the question. So maybe a couple of the city council members that are present and whoever else that is here that have more direct access to the mayor could take to the mayor this concern coming from not only myself, but other people that have no extensive history of drug use, much less any history of drug use at all. And then we're the last ones on the burner to get any kind of assistance. But the first ones that get help are the ones that's got extensive drug use problems. I do not feel that they should get any type of housing assistance when it is an everyday problem that they're on drugs and that yet they're out here scot-free to keep on prostituting themselves out to go and find more drugs to get high again. And then they're out here making messes all over the city for people like myself, Rodney, these three, and Marcus. We can't do a daggone thing about it because the mayor refuses to do anything. The governor's refusing to do anything. I've attended city council meetings about this issue. Nobody has done anything about anything. But I feel like that the people that have drug abuse problems do not deserve to be in line for housing or shelter. They need to be in line for rehab or potential life in jail or prison because of the choosing to chronically keep on coming out after leaving rehab to go and use drugs. And then they come right back outside again out of rehab, go run right back to the drugs again, go get locked up, come right back out, get locked up, come right back out, get locked up, come right back out. But the minute that it's time to get cold outside, people like myself is left out here having to fend for ourselves out here in the street in the cold. You know, but it's a problem. It's a serious problem, and somebody needs to address that. You know, I use marijuana. I'll be the first one to admit I use marijuana. You know, and we all know that marijuana is nothing more than a plant, okay? But I have witnessed my own fair share of discrimination because it's almost like the city and the state and this nation wants you to be doped up on crack, want you to be doped up on heroin, want you to be doped up on methamphetamine, want you to be doped up on opioids. But the minute that I choose not to touch any of those things, no, you're going to be the last one, and now we hope and pray to God you die in the freaking cold.
So I definitely apologize about your experience. We would love opportunities to work with you and others that we can make sure that your voices are incorporated to information that would reach the task force, that would reach the mayor. We really would be glad to work with you. We agree that there is a problem. That's why we want to establish more resources, more permanent resources. We don't want a temporary solution every year that isn't sufficient to meet the entire need. We want a solution that would serve everybody and that would serve people year round. I know that that might be difficult for you to speak on, and that's totally your choice whether or not you want to continue those conversations with us. This office is a small office that, to put into context, is trying the best that we can, and we would really love to be able to infuse the work that we're doing with your input, your observation, and your expertise.
I just want to say, you know, it's almost like the city, and this does not this is not meant to offend any of you here in this office, in this conference room. But I just want to point out that out of everybody that is here that is government affiliated, there's only 2 melanated people here. And the rest of you are white. That too is a problem.
We acknowledge that. We definitely welcome you to come and participate in any meetings and have conversations. I'm sorry for your experience. Rodney?
Yes, I have like a question kind of leading to the answer. I was trying to figure out how does the panhandling ban, where do they get their funding from?
So the panhandling van is contracted through the Division of Environmental Services.
Okay. And my concern was the amount of trash that's being left around the courthouse building, especially on the weekends. To see, I mean, I know the panhandling van, it gets it from their environmental thing, but maybe they could create some kind of stipend or fund to reach out to a small group of people to help clean up around the courthouse, especially on the weekends when there seems to be it seems to be a little more trash left around that area.
Right. So unfortunately, this office has no role in determining the locations that are serviced by that program. It would be overseen by environmental services. We can always take information to them and make suggestions, but we ultimately don't make determinations about where that service is going to be in the community. We would be welcoming any suggestions that you might have so we can look at things that we can additionally try to do. For example, your friend I know spoke about things like the problems that things like the litter kind of create. We face that too. We know that when that is the experience that someone has of individuals experiencing homelessness, they make assumptions, they start to make stereotypes, and then those factor into things like when we are trying to establish a shelter and someone doesn't want it in their neighborhood, it's because that's the vision that they have of what homelessness is. So we would love opportunities to speak with you and others that we can get ideals about things that we can do that might help individuals to better understand that that's not everyone experiencing homelessness, that is just one person that they've maybe seen or encountered. We would love them to be able to see you for who you are, for the experiences that you've had, for the insight that you might be able to share. And we would also love to tap into any ideas that you have for potential solutions. We do have some funds within this office. They're not going to be, significant enough to put every single person in housing necessarily, but we can do things that can make an impact. We can take individual issues like shelter, like litter issues, like substance use concerns, and we can try to target solutions that would address those. I know you've participated in the board before, have been active in events that we've had, and we would definitely welcome you, and hopefully you could bring some friends along with you that could help inform these processes. Your voice needs to be a part of it.
Okay, yeah, it's just I feel sorry for those groundskeepers every day that have to go over there and clean up all that.
Yeah, I understand. Additional comments?
Yes, my name is Anthony. I am currently homeless myself too, and I've been homeless for over 15 years in 3 different states, and I see the same scenario play out everywhere I go. I may have a solution to what you're looking for, property. Out there on North Broadway is the old Blue Compass building. And it has like 3 garages. There's a big building there. It's like I have pictures of it, and it's a huge property. It's like 14 acres. The realtor, I talked to him, he's asking $7 million for that property, but it has to be a lot of work. They're working on the water, but that's nothing to say. But I would want to profess, if you have to start a nonprofit with this and to incorporate everyone in town. Now I go to the Lexington Rescue Mission quite often. I know Tom there. I go to the Lighthouse Ministries, and also I've been to the Hope Center. But I see that there needs to be something done. This is what I would think. I would propose a place for the homeless of Lexington to rest, relax, and recharge. Currently, there are only 3 homeless shelters that provide sleeping overnight. These are full, as I've heard here before, and this homeless population continues to grow. Right now here in Lexington, the homeless need a place where they can feel at home. My mission is to fill in that gap that other organizations fail to cover. Housing first is an essential part of being stable. Second, people need to work. This property includes, like I said, 3 garages that could be used for repair cars, wood shop, manufacturing, etc. Many of the homeless get EBT, but because they're unable to cook, most of it is spent on junk food at convenience stores. The third would be provide stoves so they can cook, refrigerators to store their food, lockers for their belongings. Many of the homeless need a decent place to get their life together. Fourth would be people need church. They need to grow with their life with Jesus and their God to get to know Him. Connectiveness is very important. This home would include everything that people would need, sustainable, they're all on property, like he was talking about. For instance, I've seen this in Denver. Denver has a housing first initiative as they start out. To get the people stable, you have to have them level and they have to be clean. You have to take a shower. And this to keep a decent, thing. I mean, this is all homeless want is to have something decent and to have a place of stability, a place of normalcy. I mean, as I see it, having the funds and the necessary community action, people that would be willing to donate. For instance, down in University of Florida, I used to live down there. They have a place called Grace, and all the food that comes is from the University of Florida. It's from Shands. They donate all these facilities that they have. People they volunteer, the college students. I mean, I think another thing is getting the community more involved, getting the businesses more involved to know how devastating homelessness is. All over the United States of America, it continues to grow, and especially different states. Number one, probably New York City. Two is San Francisco. I mean, the list goes on and on. I mean, it's going to be continuous. I would just like to be able to have something that everyone can feel good about, and they put into to be able to end homelessness. Thank you.
We appreciate you being here and your comments. Definitely, we would love to have your contact information for follow-up, whether you wanted to leave your information on the sign-in sheet or meet with one of us afterwards. We have a very similar vision for what if you were to look at our shelter study, it's going to propose things that are very similar to what you're discussing. Grace Marketplace in Gainesville is actually one of the examples that I have been looking at, and I've been referencing its data in terms of making the argument for additional shelter. For example, one of the critiques or concerns that we're presented with when we advocate for shelter is that if we build additional shelter, that people will come here from other communities and we'll be seeing an influx. That's not what the data says. Grace Marketplace has a preference for their beds for local residents, and consistently over 80% of their beds are occupied by residents of Gainesville. Other communities like King County, Seattle, they're going to see 85 to 90% of their resources utilized by local residents. Additionally, there's been national studies that look at the movement patterns of persons experiencing homelessness, and around 75% of people remain in the community where their homelessness began or originated. So the data doesn't overwhelmingly support that that's a concern. Those are the exact kinds of models that we are trying to bring to the council and the administration and the community. And we want to see that level of community engagement that you speak of. We are an incredibly small office of 3 staff that are trying to do this work, and it feels like sometimes we're fighting an uphill battle and fighting a battle on all fronts. So we need as many supports as we can get in pushing this forward. I can say I've been doing this work for a number of years, and this is further than I have gotten than probably I could have imagined in terms of we are not there yet. But as of this point, our mayor has made a statement publicly that we need a permanent solution, not temporary seasonal solutions. Funding for this office has increased. I've added 2 staff positions in the past 2 years. So we are working as hard as we can. We just need help. And I'm glad to receive your help. I'm glad to receive it from anybody that wants to be a part of this conversation. So let's definitely, I think we spoke on the phone and I invited you here. Glad to see you face to face. And I hope we can continue the conversation. Thank you
Yes,
for
you too.
sharing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any other announcements or comments?
Oh, I have one more. Is it true that it is a crime to be homeless or to be without any place to lay your head?
So unfortunately, at the state level, a bill was passed that went into effect July 15th of last year, House Bill 5, that does include anti-camping provisions. So an individual can be cited under that for camping in a public place, even potentially arrested. What I can say is that locally, we are trying our best to work with individuals like our police force. When that bill first went into effect, the first month, there was about 15 citations that were given. The most recent monthly report that I saw were down to 2 citations that were issued. And those were situations that probably would have involved law enforcement due to other factors like substance use. So we are seeing that our police force locally is doing its best to try to direct people to services rather than issue citations. I'm doing training with police at all of their in-service workshops. We have police that are involved in some of our meetings to try to develop solutions for folks that we're coming into contact with frequently. However, legally at the state level, it is a crime that can be enforced. At the same time, the state does not provide us with any funding towards emergency shelter or affordable housing. So those are things that we also need to think about at the state level and the federal level. LFUCG as a city government is making investments in this area. And I know that we don't always do everything 100% correct or the way that everyone would like to see. But there's some other areas that could definitely help strengthen our response, like trying to lobby for a statewide response that would help communities to establish shelters and housing and other resources. So we need to approach this on several levels, and we're going to need help. So I appreciate your input and would love to have you at the table.
Thank you again.
Any other announcements?
Jeff, I just wanted to announce our situation table training refresher that we have for August 7th next month. So situation table, for those of you that don't know, I know we have several kind of meetings similar in the community, but this is a meeting for any community partners to bring any individuals that there's some concern that they're at an acute elevated risk and need some services, supportive services wrapped around, whether that's housing, mental health care, medical care. So that I'll send that, or I think you may have gotten it because you're on if you could send that out, that'd be great.
I was gonna say, I think I saw an email and I'll be glad to put that forward to our mailing list.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? All right. If there's no additional announcements, is there a motion to adjourn? Thank you, Bruce. Usually I know I can count on you.
If you did not sign in, please make sure that you sign in at that back table. Thank you.